Okay, so this is going to be our notes for lesson 8.5. And on 8.5, what we're going to be looking at is we're going to start looking at what happens when we have a trinomial now. Okay, now all of the ones that we are working on for this lesson only will have a 1 out front. And if it doesn't, that usually means there's a GCF. And then we'll take a look in the next lesson at what do we do when there's a different number out front other than a 1. But let's review real quick. So in the last chapter, I would have asked you to simplify this. And I would have went ahead and said x times x was x squared, right? We're just going to FOIL it out. X times 4 is 4x. 3 times x is 3x. And then 3 times 4 is 12. And so what happened was when we did 4-term grouping is we just left it like this. And you guys would group it off and pull out GCFs. And that's fabulous, but we do know that we expect you to combine like terms. And so how does this look like now when we actually combine like terms? And we get x squared plus 7x plus 12. So how do we go from this back to this? And that's what I'm going to be teaching you today, okay? So like I said, earlier on, we did 4-term grouping, and that was kind of baby stepping you into, okay, now what do we do when they actually combine that middle number now, okay? All right, so on our first example here, what we're going to be doing is we are going to be looking for factors of 20. Okay, so I'm going to kind of put some notes in here. Okay, so I'm going to look for factors of 20 that add to 9. Okay, so factors of 20 that add up to 9. That is what we're looking for here. Okay, so when I'm thinking of factors of 20, we're thinking 1 times 20, right? Factors. 2 times 10. 4 times 5. So I am looking for what will multiply to get 20, but when I add them, I get 9. So if I kind of focus in on this guy right here, right? 4 times 5 equals 20. And 4 plus 5 equals 9. So this one is what we're going to use, okay? So now you see here that I made a list, okay? If you are unable to come up with a factor quickly, and I'm talking like 15 seconds quickly, if you are not able to, go ahead and start a list. And notice I put an order. 1 times 20, 2 times 10, 3 doesn't divide. 4 does, 4 times 5. And then I stop at 5 because I'm not going to put a 5 here because then I'll just put a 4 here and then that's just a waste of time. Okay, so if you don't come up with something quickly, start a list of factors. This is something you will have to do in the next lesson. So if you see it right away, fabulous. If not, go ahead and start your list because we're going to be making a list in the next lesson. Okay, so then my answer, so it's just like kind of like the difference of squares, right? This x squared is going to break up into x and x. And we already found that 4 and 5 work. And since it's all positive, it's just going to be a plus 4 and a plus 5. So now if you were to take the time to factor this out, or sorry, FOIL this out, you'll get x squared plus 5x plus 4x plus 20. And so when I combine the middle there, I get x squared plus 9x plus 20. So yay, it checks out. So this right here is my answer. Okay, all right, let's look at the next one. So on this guy, notice that they've got it written backwards. We're going to go ahead and rewrite it. Let's just put our t squared out front in standard form. So I'm going to get t squared plus 10t plus 9. Again, it's all positives, so that means we know that in my factors, I'm going to have positives. We know that t squared breaks up to t and t. All right, and now what we've got to find, again, is factors of 9. So think about that, 1 times 9. Or 3 times 3, that adds to 10. So if I'm looking there, 1 and 9 would add up to 10. So when I take 1 times 9, I get 9, but when I add it, I get 10. So down here, I'm going to have t plus 1 and t plus 9. So again, you're just writing your factors right down in there. And this will be my answer. Again, you can check to make sure you're getting it right. Okay, so now this one changes a little bit only because it's no longer all addition and subtraction, okay? So now remember that I am multiplying here, right? That's what we're doing. We're multiplying to get this 28. So to multiply, I know that a positive times a positive will get me a positive 28. I also know that a negative times a negative would get me a positive 28, right? Negative times a negative is a positive. So now, thinking about that, if I've got a negative in the middle, that means I'm going to have a negative-negative combination here. So right off the bat, I know that w squared breaks to w and w. I know I've got a double negative now. And so now what I'm trying to figure out are factors of 28 that get me 11. Again, if it doesn't come quickly, it's okay. Start a list. 1 times 28, 2 times 14, 3 doesn't go, 4 does, 4 times 7. Okay, and as soon as I think I found an answer, I'm going to stop and take a look at it. All right, I think 4 and 7 might work. If I make this a -4 and a -7, when I add, does that get me -11? It sure does. So my answer is -4 and -7. Again, you can FOIL this out to make sure it's correct. So you shouldn't ever miss these. Okay. All right, so now let's look at this guy. Signs, again, are important. Okay. So when I have a -15 here, I know that the only way to get a negative number is to have a positive times a negative. Okay, so now let's think back to like junior high days. If I'm taking a positive and a negative and I'm adding and subtracting them, okay, well, or technically adding them up, I'm going to subtract. Okay, so remember, different signs subtract. Let me go back here real quick. Same sign, we're going to add. So same signs we add, different signs we subtract. So let's go up and look at number 3. Well, or number 2, that was all addition, so never mind. Okay, so different signs I'm going to subtract. Okay, so now I've got to make a list. 1 times 15, 3 times 5. So now which one of those could I subtract and get a 2? I'm thinking this guy right here. But again, I know that I need a positive-negative combination. So since I have more positives right here, I'm going to make the 5 positive and the 3 negative. So now when I take -3 times 5, right, that gives me -15. And when I take -3 plus 5, that gets me 2. Okay? All right, so I've got x minus 3 and x plus 5 are going to be my answers there. Okay, going to the next page here, number 5. Okay, so this one's got a double variable, but it doesn't change what we're doing. We are still trying to find factors of this that add up to this. Okay, so again, we see a -18 here. So if it's a negative, that means I have to have a positive-negative combination to multiply and get a -18. If they're different signs, we are actually subtracting to get to that 7 here in the middle. Okay, so again, if you can't come up with something quickly, start a list. So I've got 1 times 18. That's not going to get me a 7. All right, I'm going to go to 2 times 9. Well, that might work. Okay, so I'm going to focus in on this guy and see if I can make something work here. So now I know one's positive, one's negative. So if I make the 2 positive and the 9 negative, when I take 2 times -9, that gives me -18. And when I take 2 plus -9, that's going to get me a -7. So yay, it works. All right, so now let's break down our answer here. So x squared goes to x and x. All right, I know that my +2 and -9 combo is what I'm going to go with. And then be careful here because you have y's on the back side right here, okay? So make sure that y's show up on the back side down here. So I want a 2y and a 9y. And there's your answer. Okay, all right, let's try another one here. So again, it's a negative, so I have a positive-negative combination, okay? And if it's a positive-negative, that means I'm going to subtract, okay? All right, so I got 1 times 48, 2 times 24. So far, those are no good. I've got the next one, 3 goes. Well, if you're not sure, go ahead and take your calculator and take 48 divided by 3. You'll find it goes in 16 times, and I think this might be the winner right here, okay? So since I have more positives, I'm going to make the 16 positive and the 3 negative. So now when I take -3 times 16, that gives me the -48. But when I take -3 plus 16, that gives me the positive 13 I'm looking for. Okay, so my y squared is going to break down to y and y. I'm going to have a -3 and a positive 16. Okay. All right, so now we really got to think here on this one. Reminder, you do not know what to do when there's a number out front yet. So if you see in this lesson a number out front for right now, you need to pull a GCF. So you're going to go ahead and pull a 2 out. Okay, always pull your GCF first. I'm going to get y squared minus 17y plus 72. Okay. All right, so now let's look at our signs. I have a positive here, so it's either positive, positive, or negative, negative. I'm going to need a negative, negative combo. Okay, so same signs. We're going to add. All right, and I'm going to start my list here. 1 times 72, 2 times 36. All right, I'm going to divide by 3 here. 3 times 24. That's getting closer. That's 21. Okay, so now I'm going to divide by 4. 4 times 18. No, that's not going to work. Okay, 5 won't go. Okay, 6 will. 6 times 12. Okay, when I add that, that gets me 18, so that's still not quite there. So then it goes 7. All right, 7 won't go. So how about we erase that one? Let's try 8. So 8 times 9 would go. Okay. So now if I'm looking at this, I think this might actually finally be our answer here, right? If I have a negative 8 and a negative 9, that's going to get me my negative 17. And when I multiply negative 8 times negative 9, I get positive 72. So I've got a 2 on the outside, y minus 8, and y minus 9. Okay, let's go to number 8. Okay, so again, I don't know how to solve a number out front yet. Okay, so you should be pulling a GCF of a 5 here. So I get m squared minus 3mn plus 2n squared. Okay, now thinking about your signs, positive, positive, or negative, negative. It's going to need to be a negative, negative here. Okay, and now it's kind of nice here. 1 and 2 are your only options. And if they're both negative, well, negative 1 and negative 2 when I add gives me negative 3. So I'm going to keep the 5 out front. M minus 1. Now, don't forget the n on the back side here, okay? And then I'm going to get m minus 2n. And there's my answer. All right, so now, in this, a rectangle's area is x squared minus 1x, or x minus 72. What are the possible dimensions of a rectangle? Okay, so now, guys, we are thinking area, right? So area would be length times width, okay? And the question is possible dimensions, so we just want to find the length and the width. That's what it's telling us. So now the nice thing about this is this is the only type of word problem you would definitely see in this chapter, and it's basically just telling you, come up with the two things you multiplied together. So what are your factors here? That's what it's asking you to do. So x squared is going to go to x and x, all right? And then I'm looking for factors of negative 72, okay? So we know that that means I got to have a positive negative combination, which means subtraction because they're different signs we subtract to get a negative 1 in the middle. Well, 8 and 9 kind of pop into my head right away, and I'm going to make the 8 positive and the 9 negative. So now when I multiply, I get negative 72, and when I add, that gives me negative 1. So I'm going to have x plus 8 and x minus 9, and that would be your length and your width for this problem. All right, that concludes these notes.